How would you like to improve your health and keep your family safe? You're listening to the Healthy Home Hacks Podcast, where we firmly believe enjoying optimal health shouldn't be a luxury. Healthy Home Authorities and husband and wife team Ron and Lisa will help you create a home environment that will level up your health. It's time to hear from the experts. Listen in on honest conversations and gain the best tips and advice. If you're ready to dive in and improve your well-being and increase your energy, you're in the right place. All right, here are your hosts, biobiologists, authors, media darlings, vicarious vegans, and avocado aficionados, Ron and Lisa Barris.
Question: do you feel sick, depressed, or unhealthy? Maybe you're suffering from chronic health problems or just annoying symptoms that just won't go away. From headaches and brain fog to joint pain and worse, there's nothing more daunting than feeling sick, but not knowing why. Hang with us because today's guest has become a beacon of hope for countless individuals in search of answers.
One of the questions we get asked the most in over our 15 years in the business of creating healthy homes is, I think my home has mold. What should I do? Well, today we're diving deep into how mold growth is linked to disease, chronic health problems, and even death. It can be scary, overwhelming, and in many cases, very costly, especially if you don't know the right steps to take, who to trust, what visible signs to look for, or symptoms you may be experiencing from mold exposure. Put down that bottle of bleach and hang on to your rubber gloves, because if you can relate to any of what we just said, you don't want to miss today's show.
We have a very special gift for our fabulous listeners. Stay tuned till the end, because our guest is going to gift you with a free ebook, 15 tips to prevent mold in your home. Our special guest today is Brandon Faust. Brandon is the owner and founder of Mold Solutions, an industry-leading indoor air quality company specializing in top-tier remediation, atomized sanitization, and duct cleaning services.
Driven by his commitment to health and healing, Brandon's dedication stems from his own family struggle with unexplained chronic illness. With a heartfelt mission to address these widespread health concerns, in just 1.5 years, Brandon has propelled Mold Solutions from a dynamic startup to a thriving enterprise boasting a highly skilled team of 15 staff members. Brandon's accomplishments and unwavering commitment have garnered major recognition. In 2021, he was honored with the prestigious Inc. 5000 award and propelled the company to an impressive number 377 ranking on the coveted Inc. 5000 list.
Very impressive, and we're thrilled to have him here with us today. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited for this. It's great to talk to your audience and exactly the type of people that I want to be talking to about the problems that we solve.
Yes.
Well, Brandon, they want to be listening to you too. So this is a mutual symbiotic relationship here today.
Yeah. We are so happy to have you with us. As I said, this is always a hot topic, and we've done many podcasts on mold, but none with a mold remediator, actually. So you're the first, and this will be a new, interesting, really unique perspective. Just to start off the show, can you briefly tell us how you got started in the mold industry? Because I know that wasn't your background. I'm assuming.
It definitely wasn't. I mean, my dad had a construction company on the West Coast when I was a teenager, and I had done some jobs that definitely dealt with, mold. But at that point in time, it was sort of the general perception of mold, like it's not a big deal, just kind of like get it out and move on, Mm-hmm. And when I moved to Tampa, a buddy of mine had approached me on helping him with a mold business. So initially, I actually turned him down because I wasn't interested. Similar to when my wife said, "Hey, we should get a mold test for the home." I was like, "I'm not interested. Why would we do that?"
Oh, I think a lot of people listening can relate to that one.
Oh, yeah. It was one of those things. The woman's intuition, I have learned, is actually something you really do need to listen to.
You're a smart man,
Brandon.
Brandon.
Ron, turn your volume up, please. Turn your volume up, Ron. Yes, I tell him that all the time.
I didn't hear anything Brandon said, right? Missed
that's
that part.
very, very true. We have interviewed so many experts, and whether it's, organic mattresses, water purification, air purification systems, you name it, doctors, they all say that. They say always trust your gut. Trust your gut when you're taking your kids to the doctor or hospital. Trust your gut with your own health. And of course, women, we do kind of have this superpower. I think we all do, but women, maybe we rely on it more, especially mothers, and really just
Mothers.
Mothers, right? Yeah. If you get that feeling, there's a reason.
Right.
100%. So that was really what happened. I moved into Tampa. A buddy approached me. I turned him down. And then he said, look, there's equity involved if you want to do this. And I said, okay, well, I'm a little bit more interested at this point in time. And not, a few months into it, my son, who was a month old, was getting sick. He was like grasping for air, almost like sounding like Darth Vader, in the morning, just like, like an asthma attack. So my wife was ready to take him to an emergency room. And I said, okay, let's just put it on hold for 1 second. I'm going to apply all this training that I just got and make sure that we don't have a situation in our own home. And my mom had just come to visit because of the baby. She was using the shower, and there was a pinhole leak in the wall, where that shower was located. And it was basically that water was wicking up a shelving system that we had just bought. And it was in the same room where our air handler was located. And I moved the shelving system, and it was 2 foot by 2 foot of mold. And that mold, Aspergillus penicillium, it was like this green-white mold, colonized right there, being distributed all throughout the house. So at that time, we fixed the leak, cleared out the contaminated material, and then we ended up doing the whole home sanitization method. And the next day, my son slept an hour longer, and he had no trouble breathing whatsoever. And that was my first oh, wow, this is actually really important. This is not a small deal.
And you had just been in the midst of training for this. That's so synchronistic, right? I mean, what are the chances? Maybe
divine timing. Yeah.
Very serendipitous.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
100%. There was something that was occurring there because it really put me on a path at that point where the business became a mission. It became something that I was very passionate about, but it took a whole nother level. When it happens to your kid, that's, a huge thing already. But then I ended up getting sick as well in 2019. And I thought it was from mold, but the air samples were telling me otherwise. I couldn't see anything. I had checked a few spots in my master bedroom. It seemed all good. And then 6 months later, my AC overflowed, and I was removing the continuous flooring in my home. I get to the master, pop a baseboard, and there was a toxic mold called chatomium behind the baseboard. And then I start removing drywall, and it literally was in 3/4 of the master bedroom. And for me, I was overloaded. I had even done a mycotoxin test, and I knew I was impacted by mold, but I thought it was from other people's moldy homes. And sure enough,
that's what I was going to say, Brandon. Yeah, I wonder if you thought that. Yeah, because you do service so many homes, if you thought that initially was. Yeah, interesting. Wow.
Like the hairdresser with the bad hair, Brandon.
Yeah, the cobbler with no shoes, right? So that's what ended up happening. And it was a very pivotal moment for me because prior to that, the company that I was with at that time that we had taken to the Inc. 5000 list, right, number 377, we were doing demolition-free mold remediation. And we thought that this was kind of the way of the future for mold remediation. And I was schooled in a way that I would never forget. That yes, you can lower the air spores and you can lower the counts, but unless you actually get the source, unless you actually find the root cause and remove that, you're still going to be sick because it's not just the spores, it's the mycotoxins. Right. Myco is the Greek word for fungus, right? That's what actually causes a health issue.
You're the first person who's ever said that. I did not know that. Myco is fungus. Okay, I'm always going to remember that now. Fungus toxins. And so in your old company, they wouldn't have gone and removed the source then, is what you're saying? So it really wasn't efficient?
100%. Yeah. So look, there's an aspect, there's a time and a place for everything. And there's certain points where that might be a good solution, but it isn't a complete solution. And unfortunately, sometimes the marketing that you get, it may not be 100% what is actually correct. So
it sounded trendy.
That was where I took a hard pivot.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting.
It sounded good. Sounded great. And, it wasn't one of those things that I didn't particularly know better. I was new to the industry, relatively. And, at that moment, I told my partners, look, I'm out if we continue to, tout this as the end all be all, because for me, I'm not going to be able to push something that I know is not the complete solution. So we did a hard pivot at that point, and we started doing the traditional remediation where you actually remove the contaminated material. And then the whole home sanitization is like a final step.
Right. Going back to why didn't the mold tests pick up that particular mold? Did you do an airborne and a surface? And was it because you weren't actually near the mold, the source? Why didn't those tests detect it?
Well, I think that that's a fantastic question, and it's a really important question to be asked, because truthfully, the air sampling is about 70% inaccurate. So the only place that's an acceptable range is like as if you're a baseball hitter, if you're batting 300,
right.
then okay. But anything else, you're failing, So that's the sampling is basically taking a snapshot in time where whatever is in that, cubic footage for a specific amount of time. So mold may or may not be spore laden. And additionally, if you think about it, it is a spore trap. It does not test for mycotoxins. But if you go to a doctor for mold toxicity, what are they testing you for? They're testing you for mycotoxins. So one of the most important datums to understand is that a mold spore, you can fit 10 mold spores on the tip of a hair. So the tip of a hair is 70 microns. A mold spore is about 7 microns. The actual substance that it releases is 0.1 micron. The mycotoxin is
0.1.
extremely micros.
I'm guessing a HEPA air purifier. Yeah, the HEPA air purifier would absorb mycotoxins then, because that goes down to 0.3, and certain HEPAs like hyper HEPA go to 0.003. Okay, so plug there, guys. So make sure you have an air purifier.
Definitely a time and a place for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certain purifiers that are fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a whole store, and we actually have a list that we give members of our online program, a list of our top 10 air purifiers, depending on their budget. Yeah.
Excellent.
It's another question we get all the time. Which air purifier?
That's a fact, right?
Yeah.
Brandon, what are the most common health risks associated with mold exposure?
From the feedback that I get, and obviously my specialty is making the home healthy and as safe as possible, right? The body itself is a bit above my pay grade, but from the people that I talk to, headaches, joint aches, respiratory issues, coughing, itchy eyes, rashes, brain fog, depression, difficulty sleeping, which can lead to another set of factors if you're not sleeping well. The crankiness that sets in, the attention to detail, all of that stuff. So the unfortunate part is that when you're taking in, and the best way to put it is a mold spore or even the mycotoxin is a foreign invader that enters your body. So just like when you get stung by a bee or bit by a mosquito, right, you're going to have swelling. There's inflammation that occurs. So when that body starts, producing histamines at a rapid level to fight back this foreign invader, you wind up with swelling, inflammation, and disease. And some of the problems that the mold spores or mycotoxins in particular can cause are a bit more intense, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and even some of them can be carcinogenic. So it's not something to underestimate, or you want to respect the mold. You got to respect it.
The mold.
Is that what you experienced when you got sick, Brandon?
So my particular case was an interesting one because I was having a pain in my chest that would not go away. Like I literally felt like something was out of place, and I kept trying to move, and it was just this pain. I went to one doctor. He said I needed an EKG. Another doctor said I had an autoimmune disease. Another doctor said I had Lyme disease. I was searching.
Yeah.
So I did the mycotoxin test from Mosaic, the mycotox profile, and it showed that I was off the charts. But it really was. I thought I was from going into moldy homes, and it probably had something to do with it.
What's that mycotoxin?
Sure.
I'm going to put that in the show note.
Yeah, mycotox profile from Mosaic.
Mosaic. Okay. And you do that from home? Is that so testing your body?
It's a basic urine sample.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's the price point? Do you know?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to do another one.
Everybody should do that. Yeah.
Sunday, send it in Monday, 100%. So I'm going to be doing one, but it's about 300. Obviously, depending on your practitioner and what are their costs, but you can also, there's other testing that goes along with it. But this is a a clinic that really understands mycotoxins and what it can be connected to and related to. So I have a good friend of mine, Lori Frankel, who actually works for Mosaic. She's the rep in this area, and we do a lot of talk on this particular point in regards to the impact of mycotoxins on the body.
Right. Because a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of you listening, have had mold or maybe even suspect you have mold right now. Then you go through the process, whatever that may be for you, removing the mold, remediating the mold, testing for mold, and then move on and never test your body, and may have caused some serious damage without knowing it. And like you said, those kind of symptoms can get so misdiagnosed because they fall under an umbrella of like a gazillion different things, right? Especially like when we're talking about those allergenic type responses, like wheezing and watery eyes and all of that, and headache. Or who doesn't have headache? Well, I actually don't get headaches, but most people get headaches. So they wouldn't even associate that with mold. They might just think, oh, that's them, and they get a headache, right? And then for the mycotoxins.
So it really is important.
Yeah. So not all mold produces mycotoxins, right? And
I think there's a lot more research to be done in this arena. I really believe that our industry is, really at the beginning stages when you think about it. So, for example, the mold cladosporium has been labeled an allergenic mold, but the more research you do into it, you actually find out, no, this also releases a toxic substance, a mycotoxin as well. So, I think that we're going to find out that there's a lot more to mold and mycotoxins as the research progresses, and as more and more people realize that this is something that causes a host of illnesses and diseases in non-optimum physical conditions. But it is just like anything else. Like we're talking about something that's microscopic. It's still here, right? It's still alive. So that means that it's had to be able to defend itself from predators or from the environment long enough to continue its species.
Yeah, right.
It wants to live.
Just like a parasite.
So the mycotoxin, just like anything that is on that on that ultra fine particulate level, it has a defense mechanism built into it. And that is why, like, attacking mold and the way that a lot of people handle it, like you talked about with bleach. Well, let's hit it with bleach. Well, what are you actually doing? You're putting that colonized mold into defense mode and also hyperreplication mode. So it's going to want to shoot off more spores, and it's going to want to shoot off more mycotoxins. So it's like taking a baseball bat to a beehive. You've just made that problem significantly worse.
Yeah, this is a big area right here, bleach, because that's what most people think is the way they're supposed to handle mold themselves at home. I don't know how that ever even happened, because even the EPA doesn't recommend that. So when you put bleach on the mold, you're saying it kind of goes into defense mode, and so it makes the matter worse, even though visually maybe you think you got it all. You don't know what's airborne with these mycotoxins, right?
Exactly right. You've aerosolized it, and you've potentially taken the color out of it, which bleach will.
So now you think you have no mold.
It's not.
Right.
Okay. But now you've spread it as well.
You spread it. And which test is best for detecting the mycotoxins in the air? Would that be the air sample, obviously not the surface sample?
So the best test is, believe it or not, it is actually the surface sample.
Okay.
It picks up the type of mold. Okay. There's really only a few tests that pick up mycotoxins. One is the dust test. There's some other tests. Would you say the ERMI? A number of different, the ERMI, the HERTSMI, the EMA, right? So these various tests, we're not necessarily designed specifically for kind of the purpose that they're being used for right now. There's another one called the dust test. I think the dusttest.com, has it where it can pick up some of the, the readings on mold. There's also a company called Inspirotech that has a product called Air Answers, and that it's born out of, detecting airborne pathogens and that whole thing that took place in 2020, right? So they were picking up airborne viruses, et cetera. And one of the things it does to detect is mycotoxin. So, and that's from Air Answers. It is a longer test than what people are used to. It's like a 24-hour test, I believe. So, but when you're dealing with sensitivity and you're dealing with people that are debilitated from mold exposure, which can happen, there's a certain percentage of the population that just does not detox from mold the same way. It's about 25% of the population and about 2% that are extremely impacted by mold. It knocks them out completely. They cannot operate.
Is that because of the gene? Is that the MTHFR?
Yes, that's
MTHFR. I think I said that right.
The gene mutation. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So in those people, their body just won't naturally detox as effectively. They can detox eventually, correct? It's just not going to be as easy as
it's a longer process.
Okay.
Right.
So if you're listening and you're dealing with that,
and of course,
get that test. Yeah. Find out if you have that gene. You can get that test at any doctor, I believe, right? That's just a blood test. Find out if you have that gene. And it's really a good thing to know anyway, because, we're exposed to toxins every day in air, water, personal care, cleaning products, bedding, you name it. And so then if you have mold on top of it and your body isn't good at detoxing, you're going to be in a real doozy situation. So it's really, really good to know that.
Yeah, Brandon, you alluded to this earlier, but mold can a little on a side note here. You said mold can sometimes be hidden from plain sight, making it a challenge to detect. What are some of the red flags or indicators that might suggest a mold problem is present, even if not immediately visible?
Well, the most important thing when you're dealing with mold is the understanding that mold doesn't exist without water, that you have to have moisture for mold to exist. So the history of a home and the, different water intrusion issues that can take place is your first and foremost indicator. Where was there a leak? Where was water coming in the home? And then knowing that. But it's also important to know that water can come in different forms, whether it's solid in terms of ice, liquid, as most people know it, or a vapor. And especially when you're in a humid climate like here in Florida, the amount of mold problems that we're experiencing due to humidity alone is astronomical. I mean, mold can start growing at 60% relative humidity, and we're at like 69% or higher year round. So that's the mold is like capital, a breeding ground for
Florida is the mold capital.
We're not just the lightning capital of the world. We are the mold capital of the world.
That's some bragging. The alligator capital. We have our little claim to fame here. We got the earthquakes in California.
We have family there, Brandon, so we can make fun. That's right.
Yeah. It's all in good. So
yeah.
And we know mold is everywhere. It's outside.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, the point you're making is mold is everywhere, but sometimes that can be used as almost like it's no big deal. Mold is everywhere. Of course, your home has mold, and that's true. But there's, elevated levels. There's highly elevated levels, and there's numbers that are acceptable for sort of broad public. But you also have to keep in mind that the most important test, it is the person test. It is the people test, because for those guys that are sensitive, what may be acceptable for some is really high for them.
Right.
So to have somebody label it like, oh, that's an acceptable level. No. How does that person do in that environment?
Right. Even if it's a safe level, right. If it's a safe level, so to speak, but you're having symptoms. Yeah, you've got a problem. Okay. So what can listeners do to identify potential mold problems in their workplace or their school or their home? And how do they know when to seek professional help or handle it themselves?
The most important thing is really knowing what to look for and where to look.
Okay.
And mold, and it has different patterns. Most people know black mold, which is Stachybotrys, and that looks like almost like this black, oily, velvety type substance when it's kind of wet. Mm-hmm. And when it's dry, it's almost like this black chalk. And then there's another mold called Chaetomium. When the first time I ever saw Chaetomium, I literally thought it was dirt specks, like little mud specks. And it turns out that it looks like that. And then it starts growing, and then you can see the fuzziness to it. But there's orange molds, there's purple molds, green, white, brown, black. It is a variety of different molds. But understanding, like, it starts out as like a little dot, and then it starts spreading a film, and it starts spreading its roots, and then it can go fuzzy. So the most important thing, I believe, is having somebody who is an experienced detective in regards to where are the places that it frequents. The HVAC system is a huge place that mold frequents, the mold called cladosporium. It's like it loves the cold climate of the HVAC, and it thrives in cold, wet areas like the, air handler can actually create. So it's just knowing where to look, but it's going to be water spots always. Where is the water source? Where is that water coming in?
Right. You see a ring of water on this drywall, even if you don't see mold, because you're not always going to see the mold, but the water, you're probably always going to see the water leak. Of course, in your case, it was behind a shelf, and that can happen too, right? Where you don't see anything. I mean, in your case, you didn't see the water leak or the mold. You were a little investigator.
Well, for me,
there.
I did see it. Yeah. Well, I was lucky, right? That again, divine intervention let me know, like,
Yeah.
okay, you're sick. My AC overflowed, and I thought I was out of luck, but in actual fact, it was a blessing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't see it. But
right.
There's an example that I had today where, I had a client that was referred to me from a clinic here in Clearwater that treats mold toxicity. And they said, look, you have mold. And they're like, no, we don't have any mold, but the doctor's saying that we have mold, but we don't see anything in the house at all. So I went in and started investigating and saw that below their AC, there was some watermarks, and then looked further, and there's just little tiny bit of kind of darkness, right? And you can see some water damage. And then the baseboard is kind of it's popping a little bit, it's swelling a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So then I get behind that wall, and it was an unfinished wall. And sure enough, a black mold all up and down that wall once I put the flashlight on it. And the thing that was above it was the air handler. So what's the air handler doing? Taking that toxic black mold and then blowing it all throughout.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Near the AC unit, you're going to distribute it. Whoa. Yeah. Okay. So listeners want to know, okay, well, when do I handle this myself, order a test, or bring in a professional? What's your rule of thumb for that?
I mean, look, if you're going to classify it as like mildew and it's a little bit of, stuff like in your shower, on your shower curtain, then you might go, okay, not a big deal. But
don't call a professional for that. You're going to waste a lot of money.
But here's the thing. If I see that and I'm doing a free environmental consultation, the first place that I'm going to is the air handler. And, I also have a company called Real Duct Cleaning, where we do the duct cleaning, duct sanitization, and the brushing and all that type of stuff. Because it was so prevalent, I had to start being able to address the air handler as well. And in Florida, if you're a mold guy, you can't touch the air handler. And if you're an AC guy, you can't say the word mold. You can't say that you do anything with mold. So there's this total disconnect.
Oh, interesting. You have, I know we're digressing here, but because there was some bad raps about air duct cleaning, right? And I don't know why. I guess, what was the concept of why that got such a bad rap, and who should do it, and what year of their home should they do it? Should it be routine every so many years? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that the reason that duct cleaning had got a bad rap is because it wasn't being done correctly, just like anything else. Mm-hmm. So the problem is that if you have mold in your ducts and you start brushing it, what have you just done? You've agitated it. And now you've put it into hyperreplication mode, you've put it into defense mode, and you've spread it. So you can say, even if you're doing it under negative air with a high-powered vacuum, that you're getting all of it. It's just not true. You're not. And on top of that, if it was in your air ducts, it didn't stay there. It ends up getting distributed all throughout the house. So you can then recontaminate your unit. So there's a step that has to be done at the end of it, which to me is the atomized sanitization. Again, one of these things that even in the industry, from some of the guys that are more old school would say, fogging or dry fogging is not a good thing to do. It's not accepted, things along those lines. Well, I'm here to tell you it works, but you have to do it right, and you have to do it at the right time, right? And it's after you've done the traditional remediation. It's after you've removed the actual source, when you've actually done the micro cleaning, the HEPA vacuuming, the damp wipe. And now you want to destroy the airborne pathogen. And on top of it, it works as a solvent to help lift mycotoxins. So there's a huge time and place for fogging. And there's a huge time and place for after you've done duct cleaning. Okay. Because you need to handle the airborne spores.
But should you get your ducts cleaned just as general maintenance if you don't have a mold problem?
In Florida, absolutely. And now in some other climates, it might be different, because here it's a mold manufacturing plant. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Like sooner or later, you're going to wind up with mold in your unit, because it is in the outdoor environment. You're going to open your doors, you're going to open your windows, dogs are going to come in, your kids are going to come in, spores are going to get into your home. Oh. So when you have that moisture and that hot, humid air that crosses those coils, right, it starts growing. And then the way that it's designed is the box above the air handler is like an inch of fiberglass ductboard and it's porous. So now you have the coils that are really wet in this blower wheel blowing this wet, air into the ducts. And then the spores start collecting in the actual plenum box. And before you know it, you have a mold manufacturing plant that is distributing mycotoxins and mold spores throughout your house.
Oh, geez. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
So I would say like every 2 years.
We talked real quick about wet versus dry mold because you talked about Stachybotrys, what it looks like wet and then dry. Is it wet when it's closer to the moisture source, or what differentiates whether we're going to see it wet or dry?
Okay, so this is an important thing, and I'm glad you brought it up, right? Because the definition of a wet mold is a mold that will start growing at about 90% moisture content. So it takes a high level of water for it to actually start growing and colonizing. So if I see Stachybotrys or I see Chaetomium on an air sample, or, from an inspector's report, I know that there's some sort of leak somewhere or there's some sort of water intrusion issue. Now, there's dry molds like Aspergillus penicillium that can start growing at 60% relative humidity. That's not very much.
But it still needs a water source, or the humidity is the source?
The water source is the humidity. It's the vapor, right? So big difference between moisture content and relative humidity.
Okay.
So the moisture content having that water inside, and you can have wood decaying fungi that will start growing at 20% moisture content.
Wow.
But the water molds love that wetness. So you're going to need some sort of a water intrusion issue. Whereas Cladosporium, you don't need to have 90% moisture content. It will start growing in your HVAC. The Aspergillus penicillium, 60%. We have it in Florida, where come September or October, we're getting calls off the hook from the snowbirds that just came home and their AC went out, and they have a green garden all throughout their units in their condos, where it's literally on their couches, on their mirrors, on their stoves, on their appliances, everywhere. And it was just because of the relative humidity of that unit was high enough for long enough that mold started growing on every surface.
So scary. You go away on your, Ron, a lot of your parents' friends do that. They're snowbirds.
Right. Yeah. Half the year they're gone and they come back.
Would not be fun to come home and find mold all over your house. Yeah.
This is a good segue. So, Brandon, can you explain the different types of molds and mycotoxins?
The ones that I see the most commonly are Cladosporium. That's number one because it's in the HVAC and it's just here. It's like 80% of the homes that I go into, there is an issue. Stachybotrys, also Stachybotrys chartum, that's also known as black mold. That's a moisture content mold. It's going to produce a mycotoxin called trichothecene. And there's some others that it produces. Fusarium, it produces a pretty intense mycotoxin. Aspergillus is a very underestimated mold. It actually is probably the leading mold in terms of actual deaths. It causes a disease for people called aspergillosis, where the mold spore gets into the body and it starts growing in the body.
Ugh.
Right. So that's
what would be the symptom of that
mold?
What would be the symptom of Aspergillus toxicity? Would it be respiratory?
I mean, it'd be respiratory issues mainly, but you have it growing. Like if you think about it, what does mold need to grow? Water, oxygen, and nutrients. So the spore gets in the body and it's getting everything that it needs and it can start growing. So there's obviously fungal infections, so there's Aspergillus. Some of them can be good, like penicillium. That's the antibiotic penicillin comes from penicillium.
Right. So the molds
but it is an antibody.
Okay. Wow. Going back to that test for Mosaic, the mycotoxin test, that only tests for mycotoxin. It wouldn't test for mold in your body, or would it pick up that too?
It should pick up the mycotoxins for sure, because the
Aspergillus example, if that wasn't producing a mycotoxin, it might not show up in that test, but you might have. If you think you have mold in your body, it sounds like you need to do multiple tests, right?
Yes. And that would be, again, above my pay grade. So I just have done a lot of research on it because of the clientele that I am working with a lot. It is people, we are a health-centric, Mold Solutions is a health-centric mold remediation company. So we do cater to clients that, a lot of restoration companies are not going to do anything with. A lot of times when you call a restoration company, the first question out the gate is, what's your claim number? Where it's not always a matter of there being an insurance claim. And the part that becomes a little bit skewed in this industry is that if you're only doing what insurance is going to pay for, you're going to miss a lot. So you
Welcome
need to have
to the
people
medical
that
system.
first and foremost.
Yeah. Welcome to the dental and medical system. Yeah, same thing. I mean, it's crazy. Like alternative treatments aren't, typically covered by insurance, but all the drugs are, and all the really invasive surgeries and things like that, but not anything like preventative really for the most part, with exception, obviously. But yeah, so that's really a great point. Wow. Okay. So is this true? If you have, I thought it was 10 square feet of mold, that's when you need to bring in the professional remediation company. 10 square feet or more, that's pretty big.
Look, think about this, right? So 10 square feet is 3 foot by 3 foot. And the way that number come up with was somebody in New York decided like, well, what would be kind of a serious problem, right? And he put that there and it became adopted, right? It's kind of ridiculous because truthfully, if you think about it, if you're seeing colonized mold, you're usually past the point that you want to be. Because if
I saw 3 foot by 3 foot, I wouldn't be like, let me get my rubber gloves on, and go to work here. No.
That's like run for the hills. Even if it's like a foot of mold, it's like, look, the way that you're going to handle it. And usually it's the tip of the iceberg. Like I remember one home where, I saw just a little bit of something in this cabinet and was like, okay, let's get that tested. And it came back as Stachybotrys. So the protocol was, okay, remove the cabinets. By the time we were done, the kitchen was gone, the bathroom was gone, right? Half of the house was gone because it was a slow leak that had been undetected for years.
Wow.
So you don't know how far it's going to go until you start opening stuff up. So yes, there is regulation. So in Florida, if it's more than 10 square feet of mold, you're supposed to have a professional do it. But to me, it's more like, what's the cause? What's the source? Is this just because of, there's a little bit of wetness in your bathroom and there's some mold starting to grow? But even then, I would dig deeper and find out, is there a source for those spores that isn't just the spores getting, in from outside, but maybe you actually have a nest somewhere or colonization, and you really want to have somebody that knows how to look, where to look, what to look for, because it's not one test that is absolute. You have to kind of build an indoor air quality profile on a home and also still use your ability to look. So I don't think that, mold inspectors are going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. You really need to know, guys.
That's right. Yeah. One of the few jobs that is still secure. Everyone go become a mold inspector.
Right. Well, what are some of the common misconceptions about mold remediation and its effects on health that you frequently come across? And how would you debunk them, Brandon?
Well, I don't know if it's a common misconception, but a lot of times when mold remediation is done, it can make the problem worse, especially if you're not doing it in a way that is correct. So you could have some general contractors, for example, that just really don't think anything about it. Down here in Florida, they'll drink a 6-pack, go wrestle an alligator, and then they'll come in and bring a sledgehammer to your home and they'll do their demo, right? And it's like, you've just made the problem, 50 times worse. Where what really needs to happen is you need to put up a dust wall or containment barrier, put it under what we call negative air, where it's taking that nastiness and blowing it outside and not allowing it to go further into the home, doing really precise cuts and making sure that you are taking it, 2 foot by 18 inches, putting it in a plastic bag and wrapping it, goosenecking it, and making sure that it doesn't spread, doing the micro cleaning, the HEPA vacuuming, the wipe down. And then after all that is said and done, you treat the structural material, then you sanitize. And then I would always sanitize the entire building envelope, including the HVAC system and brushing the HVAC system to make sure that any of those off gases and toxicity that's floating around your home is properly addressed. And that's really, to me, the right way to do it. So is it costly? Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah, that's expensive. Right. And you think the average homeowner, when they're tackling something like that, I was actually having this conversation with someone recently, they're not sealing off areas, rooms. They're not wearing personal protective equipment. They aren't, right? They're not running HEPA air purifiers, most people. So yeah, they might get rid of mold, but then they've just exposed themselves. And like you said, maybe created a bigger problem by not properly doing it. So yeah, kind of hiring professionals, especially, accredited professionals with great recommendations, you really can't go wrong in this situation because it is really dangerous.
You could do it. You could do it yourself, but you just have to make sure you do it right.
But most people
like
don't.
have the proper PPE,
Yeah.
like full face
I was
mask,
going to do that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyvek suit, you could, but you could also, there's a lot of things you could do it on your own. You could fix an engine, but it's going to take.
Well, Brandon, I'm not going to do that. I think that would be unwise for me.
The engine or the mold? Both. Let's say both.
Both.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I thought the EPA said you could use hot soapy water for small areas of mold. Do you agree with that? To remove it yourself?
I do. I think that there's times that the soapy water is actually, like Dawn dish soap is a tool that can break into the mold spore, believe it or not, right? But the key thing is here's a great example. So you have nasty food that's been left out and you have some mold growing on it. Do you need to call in a mold remediator? Absolutely not. That's something that is going to occur. You put it in the bag, you remove it, you clean up the space, but the question is that the only source? Is that the only thing that is moldy? And that's where you would want to start looking. Is there potentially stuff that is leading to those spores landing on that food, causing a mold problem to exist? So let's say you start, and I had a client who the mold started growing on her food faster, right, than usual. So that was her first indicator.
That was her clue?
Starting to grow faster on the food.
Oh.
That was her clue. But she'd also been debilitated. She had been doing a lot of disaster recovery work. She'd gone to Turkey and during that earthquake and got hit with a lot of toxicity. Came home. So her cup was already full, right? She was already fairly toxic. She got home and she had a situation that she didn't know existed. And, she called me because she was absolutely desperate and didn't know where to turn because she was extremely active doing this disaster recovery type response. And before she knew it, she was knocked out, couldn't get out of bed, lethargic. And you would wake up with, cheeks swollen, eyes watery, headaches, and just knocked out. So we went in, I looked, going to the AC system, it's covered up and down with cladosporiums. There was a filter that existed in her unit that she didn't know about. It was hidden. So she hadn't changed it for like a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Change those filters every 3 months.
Nasty.
Every season, change your filters, your HVAC filters. Yeah. Great tip.
So we ended up cleaning up both units in her home and doing a full cleanup with the micro cleaning and the whole home sanitization. And the difference was dramatic. It literally was night and day. The next day, she said her symptoms that had been horrible for months went from a 10 to a 1. Ooh. And I just talked to her yesterday and she's back up. Now she's in Tallahassee. And before that, she was in Maui helping with the fires, right?
Hopefully
so
she's
not only did I help
herself.
to
Hopefully
change her life.
Yeah. That's amazing.
First of all, she sounds like an angel. She's helping everybody.
She sounds like an angel. Shout out to her. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, she's great.
That sounds amazing. No, that's fantastic. Last question to leave our listeners with before we go. What are some preventative measures people can take right now to prevent mold from starting in the first place? Especially those that live in high humidity areas.
That is a great question. I'm actually right now today finalizing my book, which is Mold-Free Living, Preventing Mold in a Humid Climate, right? So
nice.
It goes over all these tips in regards to what you can do to make your home like a dry fortress, a mold-free haven, right? It's just like There is no mold in this place. And it all has to do with eliminating moisture source first and foremost. So there's multiple things, like obviously proper maintenance on your AC unit, UV lights and purifiers for your AC unit. That's key. Having dehumidifiers in your home when you're not getting it below 60%. If you have a crawl space in your home, you might consider climatizing it, meaning putting down a vapor barrier, sealing off the vents, putting in a fan system and a dehumidifier in that space below your home. There's like so many actions that you can take on a daily basis, jumping in front of, like if there's let's say you have a flood or you have a drain issue or there's water that gets into your home, getting professionals to dry it out. If you have storm surge like we did here in Tampa, really doing the proper actions to remove that water and that mold and not just putting like a normal kind of home fan and, your dehumidifier that you just bought from Lowe's, and thinking that that's going to handle it. No, when you open up those walls, there's going to be mold. So there's a number of tips that I would say to make sure that your home stays as mold free as possible. So that's why that book,
Love it.
It's really important for people, yeah.
Fantastic. Those are great tips. And speaking of tips, if you stayed with us, you get the free gift that Brandon is offering you guys, which is so fantastic. So head over to moldebook.com and grab a copy of 15 tips to prevent mold in your home. Brandon, thank you so much for being with us today. Guys, you can learn more about mold solutions by visiting them online at moldsolutions.com or find them on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at mold.solutions.
Thanks for being with us today, friends. We'll have all the links in the show notes at ronandlisa.com/podcast. Join us in 2 weeks for another episode and get ready to up-level your health. Bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
Brandon. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
This episode of the Healthy Home Hacks podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more healthy living strategies and tactics to help you create the healthy home you've always dreamed of. And don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. See you on the next episode.